If you're ready to be amazed, then come with me as we climb on board Amtrak's Coast Starlight. We're going to experience what some have called the most scenic coastal train route in all of America. Along the way, we'll see cliff-lined beaches along California's central coastline. We'll enjoy the majestic, rugged wilderness of California's coastal mountain range, ending the first part of our trip in the San Francisco Bay Area. I call it the first part because this route is actually so long, it goes all the way to Washington State. And there's so much to see along the way, I had to put this in 2 separate videos just to get it all in. Now, our excursion begins at Union Station in the heart of Los Angeles. Then we'll venture through the satellite cities north of LA, passing through coastal towns of Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo, California, before we take a turn inland into the coastal mountains till we reach the plush farmlands of Salinas, California, then on through San Jose until we finally reach Emeryville, California, nestled in between Oakland and Berkeley on the San Francisco Bay. And during this part of the trip, you're going to see seascapes that will leave you breathless. We'll wander through miles of coastal mountain scenery that is totally inaccessible by car. We'll even traipse our way through a top-secret military base and see ranches that are isolated from the rest of the world. But what's even more amazing is that I'm not going to do this trip all alone because you're coming with me. In fact, our train is about to leave. So, all aboard. Today we're in Los Angeles, California. Now, if you watched our first video, you know that we arrived in Los Angeles this morning about 6 o'clock in the morning, all the way from Texas. Now we get ready to depart on the second leg of our amazing journey. This part of our trip will take us all the way to the San Francisco Bay Area. But it will all start right here at Los Angeles Union Station. This is the largest passenger rail terminal in the western U.S., kind of like the Grand Central Station of the West. It's not only a terminal for nationwide passenger service, but it's also a hub for local buses, trains, and light rail services that will take you all the way throughout the Los Angeles metropolitan area. In addition to long-distance trains like we're riding now, Amtrak has regional train service that will take you as far north as Santa Barbara and as far south as San Diego. And you can reach almost any major hub or suburb or city in the Southern California area from this very station. Now, the station design is a blend of Spanish and Art Deco style. It was completed back in 1935, and it has become a shiny symbol of this city's history. During World War II, it became a hub for troop transport, serving more than 100 trains every single week. And when it first opened, it serviced 66 trains per day and more than 7,000 passengers. That was back in 1939. But today, more than 110,000 passengers pass through these halls every single day to destinations as far away as Chicago and Seattle. In addition to train service, this station has been the host to lavish, star-studded celebrations and even events for the arts. With its 60-foot high ceilings and thousands of square feet, it features 2 great halls, even has a big food court, literally miles of concourses, loading platforms, and even a ticket counter that's more than 100 feet long. It even hosted the 2021 Oscar Awards in these very halls and courtyards. Our first stop here at the Los Angeles Union Station is the Amtrak Metropolitan Lounge. Now, this is kind of a VIP lounge for rail passengers located upstairs in this massive rail station. And this lounge is reserved just for Amtrak sleeper car travelers. It's a great place to relax. Wait for your next train away from all the crowds and the bustle. You can even safely stow your luggage here, free of charge, while you decide to take a little stroll around the station and see some of the sights, which is what I did. There are even complimentary snacks, fruits, pastries, coffee, juice, sodas. And with a little bit of time to kill before my departure, I decided to take a stroll around the terminal. And by the way, this is my second visit to this great hall. You'll find some great places to eat, grab a cup of coffee, or even shop at a convenience store for a quick snack, or just in case you forgot to pack your shampoo. And when it's time to go, that red cap golf cart comes around to the outside door right there by the VIP lounge and will give us a free ride to our train. And it beats all those long walks hauling your luggage, especially if you have mobility issues, or if you're like me and you have platinum colored hair. And before you know it, we're all loaded up and ready to leave Los Angeles Union Station. Amtrak calls this train the Coast Starlight. This is a daily train that hugs the California coastline and cuts through the northern Cascade Mountains all the way up to Seattle. It's considered one of the most spectacular routes in the Amtrak fleet, with unmatched scenery from cliff-lined beaches to snow-covered mountain peaks. The Coast Starlight is one of Amtrak's longest routes as well. It extends more than 1,100 miles from LA to Seattle along the West Coast, covering an immense distance with so much to see in between that huge sections of this route are often left out by people who make videos like this. That's why I decided to split this into two separate videos so that you don't miss out on anything along the way. But for now, we're making our way out of Los Angeles. And like you might expect, the scenery here is typical urban and suburban living. In fact, we'll probably pass through a few cities that you've heard of before. In fact, our first stop is a little town you may have heard of called Burbank, California. Situated right next to the Hollywood Burbank Airport. This is a pretty busy station, but not for long because we're on our way again very quickly, and we're off to Simi Valley, just north of Los Angeles. Now, if you're not familiar with the LA area, you wouldn't guess that there would be mountainous regions inside this sprawling metroplex. The Simi Valley is a high mountain valley area with rich agricultural resources. This high valley can often be a cooler climate than the LA area because it's tucked away in the hills just north of the city. And because of the higher altitude, it grows some pretty interesting and amazing crops like strawberries, lemons, celery, raspberries, avocados, and even the cut flowers and roses that you find at your local florist or at your local supermarket. And nestled among the hills and the valleys are a cluster of small communities, the kind of lifestyle that you might come to expect somewhere in the Midwest. Now, the Simi Valley stop is an open air station, and if you're thinking the weather is great today, well, it's kind of like that every day here. The weather in Southern California, it's a big part of the reason so many people call this area home. But leaving the station, we find our way through a very rugged segment of this trip. I bet you didn't anticipate this kind of rugged mountainous landscape right next to Tinseltown. Only a stone's throw from Sunset Boulevard are these rugged hills that is home to average everyday Californians and a few celebrities. But then the magic starts to happen. Little by little, the landscape begins to change as we descend the high valley region into Ventura County. Glimpses of the Pacific Ocean begin to peek through the buildings. And behind those concrete walls is a body of water that stretches from this beach all the way to the shores of places like Hawaii and Japan, China, Korea, and all of the Far East. For a long strip of this trip, this train will snuggle close to some of the most beautiful beachfront property in all of North America. Everything from multi-million-dollar luxurious beachfront homes to people enjoying the very same view from their RV. This place has it all. And this picturesque segment of California coastline stretches more than 30 miles, revealing the transition from an open, flat beach area to the beginning of California's coastal mountain region. We've arrived at our first fresh air break since leaving Los Angeles. And no, we're not on the Mediterranean. This is Santa Barbara. It looks like a little town that might be perched on the cliffs of some Italian coastline, but instead, we're on California's central coast. It's full of white stucco cottages dotting the slopes of the San Ynez Mountains. Santa Barbara has a charm like no other California city. In fact, the color scheme is by design, to keep the city looking pristine and to preserve its Spanish colonial heritage. In fact, Spanish Franciscan monks established this location when they built the Santa Barbara Mission in 1786, well before California became a part of Mexico or even the United States. When I lived in Southern California, this was one of our favorite weekend getaways, just a couple of hours north of LA. This is one of Amtrak's picturesque fresh air stops, so we're able to get off and stroll around for a bit, take in some of this crisp ocean air at a temperature in the mid-60s in the middle of June, which is kind of normal for this area. So don't forget your jacket. But before long, we continue our way up the coast, following the Pacific Coast Highway north as we approach an area that you won't soon forget. In fact, this highway will take you the entire length of California's coastline through places like Monterey and Santa Cruz, San Francisco, and even to one of my very favorite places, Bodega Bay, California, just north of San Francisco. You might remember that place if you remember a guy by the name of Alfred Hitchcock. He made a movie there called The Birds that was filmed right there on Bodega Bay. But for now, brace yourself, because the next several minutes will take your breath away as we follow the cliff-lined coast to see some of the most beautiful water and scenes in this country. In fact, this segment is too good for words. As our train moves inland, we begin our journey into another unique region of California's coast, because nestled in these hills are some of the greatest mysteries of California. While this area seems somewhat isolated compared to what you know already of Southern California, that's because it is isolated intentionally. You see, there are two things that keep this area very private and hidden from the rest of California. In fact, a lot of this area is not even accessible to the public. And much of what you're going to see today can only be seen through the windows of this Amtrak train. Now, the first reason for this isolation are two private ranches, the Hollister Ranch and the Jack and Laura Dangerment Preserve. Now, the Hollister Ranch is a 14,000-acre ranch located here in Santa Barbara County. This is actually a working cattle ranch, and it's nestled into these bluffs, isolated beaches, and rich grasslands. And the ranch was actually founded by Colonel William Hollister in 1866, right after the Civil War. The area, however, was originally discovered and settled by Spanish explorers and expeditions in 1769. Now, technically, by California law, these beaches are open to the public, but access can only be gained through ranch property, which is rarely granted. Then there's the Jack and Laura Dangerment Preserve. This place has been called the last perfect place in California because it's tucked away here on a 24,000-acre preserve near the jagged cliffs of Point Concepcion. Archaeological facts from over 9,000 years of human life have been discovered on this preserve. In fact, this was a private ranch, family ranch, for more than 100 years. And the only access given to the outside public is by joining one of the preserve's volunteer environmental restoration work days. And it's mostly only visible by air or through the windows of Amtrak's Coast Starlight. Now, the second reason for this area's isolation is its strategic military position, because you see, this area is also home to Vandenberg Air Force Base. Now, included, in addition to the Air Force Base and typical Air Force operations, this is also the home of Vandenberg Space Force Base. And included in the base are several launch sites used and maintained by SpaceX. There's a lot of top secret satellites and military type missiles and spacecraft that are launched from this area. In fact, air flights over this area are restricted. Other than military access, yes, you guessed it, you can only see these facilities from the windows of this train. And slowly we make our way into California's coastal mountain range. Making this climb up into the mountains in a huge train is quite a challenge. It's a long, slow climb, and these sharp switchback curves, as they call them, help the trains make that steep climb, and even more so for trains going in the opposite direction to control their speed of descent. Now, what you see next might change the way you think about California, because when first-time visitors to the Golden State think about mountains in California, their first thought is to think about the Sierra Nevada, places that are home to Yosemite National Park or Lake Tahoe, when in fact there are numerous mountain ranges in California, and one of the most dominant in the coastal region is the one running from San Francisco all the way down to Southern California. It's called the Coastal Mountain Range. Now, this range separates the Central Valley, the San Joaquin Valley, with places like Modesto and Fresno and Bakersfield. It separates those areas from the coastal areas and the beaches, and it's a significant separation because this is not just a geographic separation. It's a major climate difference between the two areas. Let me explain. Compared to the desert-like climate of the Central Valley, the coastal region is cooled by chilly water currents of the Pacific Ocean coming down from Alaska. For example, when I lived in Orange County, just south of LA, my office was located in Irvine on the east side of this range of mountains. But my home was located on the coastal side of these hills near Laguna Beach. Now, during the hot summers, I could leave my office in Irvine where the temperatures were in the high 90s. But by the time I drove home, less than 20 minutes away, the temperatures were in the 70s. Now, that's quite a difference when you can sit in your backyard in the middle of August in the late afternoon and you need a jacket. Two unique climates so close together that it allows you to grow a lot of different crops. That's why the wine industry is so prevalent in California, because the cooler coastal regions are ideal for growing certain varieties of grapes that you can't grow anywhere else. And not only that, but few homes in the coastal region ever need air conditioning. And that's unheard of in places like Palm Springs or Phoenix or even Oklahoma or Texas. And it's why when it's 105 degrees in Fresno, driving over the hills to Monterey will put you in temperatures of 65 degrees in the middle of the summer. That's why Mark Twain once said, "The coldest winter I ever experienced was a summer in San Francisco." Now, this area might seem a bit rustic and rugged, but it has its own natural beauty. Growing climates and seasons really do open the door to a huge diversity of crops and produce. One thing I noticed first when I was touring around the state of California for the first time is that every area tends to specialize in a specific kind of crop, depending on the climate. And when you come into a farming community, there's almost always a sign that advertises the local produce or the particular crop that's prevalent in that area. I've seen signs that boast of being the artichoke capital of the world. Watsonville, California, boasts of being the garlic capital of the world. And yes, you can literally smell that town coming 20 miles down the road. I guess that's why they say that California is the land of fruits and nuts. And sometimes they're even talking about the produce. And after making our way up to the San Francisco Bay Area, I finally enjoy some much needed rest at my hotel in Emeryville, which is a suburb of Oakland, California. Tomorrow, you can join me as we spend some time exploring the city of San Francisco, and then take my second leg of this trip up north. We'll make our way through Northern California, the Cascade Mountains, and all the way to Portland, Oregon. So join me for part 2 of my excellent summer Amtrak adventure on the Amtrak's Coast Starlight. All aboard!